Hey, Brew and Feed here. Hey, I'm in the brew house and I decided to show you a cool piece of tech that I have that we use here in the brew house. I think I've mentioned this before, but if you didn't know, we use that brew house back there, which is a 5-barrel Deutsche brew house. We have our own fermenters here. There's 3 5-barrel fermenters here. One is called Taco, one is called Burger, and this one is called Wings. But we use this one as a bright tank. What a bright tank is the last stage of fermentation or conditioning before you put it in your kegs or you package it or you can it. The last step you need to do is to carbonate the beer. You can carbonate the beer as it's going in the keg. There's tools that let you do that. You can condition it and carbonate it in the fermenter. And we use what's called the Bubble Butler. I know, crazy name, right? The Bubble Butler to do that. The Bubble Butler is owned by Wild Goose Canning. It used to be called the Fizz Whiz. But what it does is it conditions our beer with CO2 to the right level of CO2 volumes based on multiple different factors. The temperature probe here that goes into this, this temperature probe chamber here. And that just goes, there's a long tube that goes inside of the beer, and this slides into that to test the temperature of the beer. Temperature of the beer needs to be 35 to 38 degrees, so it knows to start carbonating once the temperature of the beer gets down to that level. There's a CO2 intake, so we have CO2 running at 30, I believe at 30 psi coming in. There's a connection for the carbonation stone. So this connects directly to my carbonation stone, which is a long stone that sends tiny bubbles of CO2 into the fermenter. One cool thing about this is there's a valve, there's some settings here that you change when you set this up to tell it how big is your fermenter, to tell it how far above the carb stone your beer is. It knows to carbonate your beer based on how much beer is above the carb stone. It needs to know that because depending on how many volumes of CO2 you set it to, it's going to send bubbles up there at the right size to dissolve into solution. So if you have a whole lot of beer, all the way 2 stories worth of beer, you may want bigger bubbles because it's going to take them a longer time to get to the top, and they have time to dissolve by then. And maybe if you have a smaller amount of beer, like I have a smaller tank, you don't need such a big bubble. So it kind of adjusts with this setting here. You can adjust the size of the bubble based on how much beer is above your carb stone, and that gives you the right size carbonation bubbles. You ever have champagne and the bubbles are really tiny, and you have beer, the bubbles are a little bigger, and soda, they're even a little bigger. That's why, because the way you carbonate, how long you carbonate, the size of the bubbles, the amount of carbonation that goes in based on how much volume is in the tank. So it's measuring the pressure of the tank as well. There's a little bulb right here that's connected to this tube, and it goes all the way up into the beer to the top, and it measures the pressure of the beer, so it knows what the pressure of the beer is as it's putting CO2 in there. So it measures temperature, it measures pressure of the tank itself, it measures how much CO2 is going in, and it throttles that. And then it also adjusts the size or the amount of CO2 is pushing in based on how much beer is in the tank. So this is a pretty cool piece of tech that gets my beer carbonated just right. So when you go to put it on tap, it's not all foamy. And that's it. Bubble Butler carbonation in the Brew and Feed brew house. Brew strong and feed well.